we are choosing from unconscious parts of ourselves. And if we don't do the work to heal our trauma and our wounds, we're still going to be using those same unconscious wounded parts of ourselves to pick someone who may look entirely different on the outside, but often the outcome is the same because we're the common denominator.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 450 with guest Kate Anthony. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone, my dear listeners, my lovely, lovely humans. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here. Hey, a couple of quick announcements. If you have a suggestion for the show, like if you know that the spirituality and creativity theme is coming up and the self-care theme is coming up and you are like, you know who needs to be on the show? This person. Send me a DM on Instagram. I love to hear suggestions from you. I am constantly perusing the interwebs, mostly social media, in an attempt to find really smart, interesting people who can educate and inspire and motivate us to be better humans. So I'm really excited for the spirituality theme that's coming up after the relationships one. All different kinds of guests, all different kinds of spirituality themes. And I'm really enjoying the way that we're doing this podcast this year because I'm learning so much. And I hope that you are too. So yeah, shoot me a message on Instagram. I would love to hear from you or just say hi. I'm still the one who answers the DMs over there. So Instagram is being weird about sending them to my spam filter. So if you don't hear from me for a minute, that's why. But I'm coming in hot. All right. The other thing is, if you are on the fence about joining us this September for my Daring Way retreat, I am hosting 12 phenomenal women, and we're going to be in Asheville, North Carolina. The Daring Way is the modality based on the research of Dr. Brene Brown that I am trained and certified to facilitate. And you can hop on the phone with me for a quick chat to get your questions answered. Make sure that this is the right retreat for you to attend. So you can go to the retreat page. It's at andreaowen.com/retreat. Scroll down to the FAQs and there's a link to book. Super easy peasy. Or you can reply to any of the emails that you get. Don't DM me for that because I'm just going to tell you to do those 2 things because I cannot be trusted with scheduling. That is all on Emily and Rebecca. So yes. FAQs on andreaowen.com/retreat, or just reply to any of the emails that you get from me, and we can hop on the phone together and have a little chat. So today we're talking to my dear friend Kate Anthony, who's been on the show so many times. I don't know how many times she's been on, many times. And she is, well, let me just read you her bio because she has such an amazing niche, the people that she serves in her business. Let me tell you about her. Kate Anthony is the host of the critically acclaimed and New York Times recommended podcast, the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, and the creator of the groundbreaking online coaching program, Should I Stay or Should I Go?, which helps women make the most difficult decision of their lives using coaching tools, relationship education, geeky neuroscience, community support, and deep self-work. Kate empowers women to find their strength, passion, and confidence, even in the most disempowering of circumstances, and help them move forward with concrete plans, putting their children at the center, not the middle, of all decisions. Kate lives in Los Angeles with her son, whom she lovingly co-parents with her ex, her 2 pups, and a handful of fish. And before we jump in, keep in mind, this is not for people who have either been divorced, not necessarily, I should say, for people who have been divorced or are contemplating divorce or going through one. We do talk about that a little bit because it is her niche, but we talk mostly about relationships. And so without further ado, here is my conversation with Kate. Kate Anthony's back on the show.
Hi.
Were you talking over me just then?
I was sorry.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Of course. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I think this is probably at least your fifth or sixth time on the show. And we're doing something a little different than we've done before. I don't know if I've had you on specifically to talk about this, to talk about what you chat about all day long on your podcast. And for people who are single, please stick around. There's going to be questions and commentary for everyone. But you specialize in people who are getting divorced, more specifically women who are getting divorced, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And even more specifically, moms.
Okay.
Just to niche it down far. Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Do you help women though that even are child-free?
I do.
It just tends to be moms.
Do.
Yeah.
It just tends to be moms. And I also help people decide whether to stay or go. Like that's the other sort of half of my,
yeah. And some people
business,
stay.
They do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump in then, because I have heard this, and I heard this before I married my second husband, and it freaked me out a little bit. I've heard that the divorce rate for second and third marriages is higher than for first marriages. And why do you think that is? Or is there research that tells us exactly why?
I don't know that there is specific research that tells us exactly why, because I think that would be somewhat difficult to do. But I will say that all of us professionals in the divorce industry are pretty much in alignment on why that is. And it's pretty logical, right? Most of the time it's because you're not doing the work. People are not doing the work to figure out what went wrong the first time. And they're like, he was an asshole, she was a bitch, and it was their fault. And so I'm just going to choose someone different. And as we know, and I'm sure you talk about all the time, we can consider that we can think that we're choosing someone different, but then, oh my God, it's like, it's the same. Right. And like, how did that happen? Right. And it's because we are choosing from unconscious parts of ourselves. And if we don't do the work to heal our trauma and our wounds, we're still going to be using those same unconscious wounded parts of ourselves to pick someone who may look entirely different on the outside, but often the outcome is the same because we're the common denominator. You've experienced this, right? Not with your current necessarily.
Well, I learned
right?
I learned exactly what you said, that happened. And I was like, I woke up one morning and I was like, I'm the common denominator. And it's easy to put a lot of the blame on ourselves, but at the end of the day, you just have to go and do your work, because you're absolutely right. Like that's what I was doing. I was trying to heal my childhood wounds through my partners and also reacting from these unconscious abandonment wounds. And then I decided, and I was already married to Jason when I really saw, it took my second marriage to really see all of my wounds and go, okay, this isn't a him problem. It's a me problem. And not to say, he didn't have his own stuff that he needed to work on, but mine became very obvious in my second marriage. I think, right. And I think I had a similar thing when I married my ex-husband, where I was like, I remember one time like being like in the fetal position. This is like when we were dating, and like rocking back and forth because he was triggering such like incredible amounts of deep stuff, right? That I was literally in the corner in the fetal position, rocking and crying. And I was like, okay, this is not him. This is me. This is my stuff. Now, it was also him. And if I had really gone deeper into the work, I probably wouldn't have married him, but that's a whole other story. Yeah. But, and I think in your case with Jason, it was like, okay, here I am with this guy who's really great. He's doing all the right things. I'm getting triggered in all these ways that this is now this is me, right? Like now this is my shit. Yeah. And that's what I had to go and work on. And so I'm going to ask you some questions, like some general questions. And then like the second half, I want to ask you specific questions around divorce and kids and things like that. So people who are in that situation, stay tuned. We're going to get to that. But I know you talk a lot about smashing the patriarchy. How do you think the patriarchy has affected women's ability to find happiness and fulfillment in their marriages or their long-term relationships? How has it not? I know. Andrea, how has it not? It was a rhetorical question. I know. How long do we have, babe? Yeah. Pretty sure you just wrote a book about this. There are a number of things. I think toxic masculinity is a huge part of it.
And when I talk about toxic masculinity, I really want to be clear. I'm not saying that men are toxic. I think that the entire thing needs a rebrand. But the fact that the patriarchy has men and women in these very specific, sort of gender specific columns, right, of what we expect from them, what we require of them, or each other and us. And so with the fact that overall, I'm speaking generally here, I don't want to get like a not all men conversation going, but overall, generally speaking, men have not been taught that their emotions are okay, that their emotions are worth looking at, that they're, anything, right? And so we've got a lot of men who have been so disserviced by this system that also sort of upholds them as more, gives them more power and more access and all of the things, right? But it also does them such a huge emotional, psychological disservice. And so then when women are getting into relationships with these men, and also the patriarchy tells us women that we have to do the work, right? That we're the ones
we're the
overwhelming. Yeah, we're the nurturers. But we're also the ones who are overwhelmingly consuming personal development. We are overwhelmingly going to therapy. And, men are told to like man up and like, all of that stuff. And so really so we've got these two types of people trying to get into a relationship with one another. And women are overwhelmingly doing so much of the emotional labor in relationships, and we're tired. And I think we're at a point in history where we are able to name it. We're talking about it, and we're able to say, actually, no. Actually, no. Right? Actually, no. That's the title of the episode. Actually, no. And that we're able to opt out, and it's okay. Like we're no longer, well, we are, but we are moving away from this idea that women are overwhelmingly like not okay if we're single.
Yeah.
Right. That we have to be in a relationship, that we in order to be a whole human, we have to be partnered. Right. And as a culture, we are moving away from that. And so more and more women are opting out of relationships that aren't serving them and not really opting back in.
Yeah.
The rate of second marriages for women is far lower than for men. Men have to get married. They get remarried so quickly because suddenly they have to replace all the labor that we're doing. Right. And then women are like exhausted and like, yeah, no, actually, I'm not so signing up for that again. It is. Yeah.
It's fascinating where it's going. And I even think about, I think that pop culture and the media we consume growing up is so important. And if you think about you and I, when we grew up and how controversial the Mary Tyler Moore show was, that she was single and she worked, like she put her career first and she was child free and the show wasn't based around, and it was actually a little bit like, I didn't watch it. I just remember people talking about it. It was a little bit before my time.
It was a little earlier than us.
Yeah. The show wasn't based around her looking for a husband. Like that wasn't the premise. It was about like her and her friend and her job.
And her job.
Oh my gosh. Like women have other interests than constantly looking for a husband. And then I think about Sex and the City and how 3 of the 4 main characters, like the show revolved around them looking for a partner. Samantha was the only one who was really only interested in her sexual gratification, which was also a big deal. So it's so fascinating to me to think about all these shows that have shaped us over time and how that is changing, which makes me so happy. And also I want to touch on something else that you were, that I know you talk about, and just in general with patriarchy. And so, as you know, I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and it's so like the whole mental health TikTok is super interesting, in relationships and the amount of women who are claiming that they are either in a relationship with a narcissist or have an ex who's a narcissist. So I really I wonder, the guy that that faked cancer to cover up his drug addiction. I wonder if he was like actually a sociopath. Like,
oh,
however,
100%, 100%.
But even my ex-husband, like all the lies and stuff that he told, I don't know. I think that what's interesting about that is that it's not statistically possible for the amount of narcissists to exist that people say there are. And I saw this one woman talking about this, and she said, they're probably not a narcissist. They're just a man who was raised in a patriarchy. To think that he is so self-important and so entitled. Like there's a lot of similarities between narcissism and entitled men. It's fascinating to think about that. And then the last thing I want to say before I forget is I think I probably saw it on TikTok as well. Someone was talking about really think about, like, let's just think about like your exes. What did they bring to the table? Like, what did they bring to the relationship? And I was aghast when I heard that question. I was like, oh my God. My ex-husband brought literally nothing.
That's right. That's right. Except for pain and drama and confusion and gaslighting.
No dick is worth lying. You know, we had some good times. Of course we did. We had a friendship, but it was not worth everything that happened. And like the amount of labor that I put into that relationship is shocking to me.
Shocking. It is shocking. And also completely normal. Completely normal. This is what women do.
My story is not uncommon.
It is not. It is not. It is not. So I want to go back to the first part about narcissism. Here, I have thoughts. Andrea. You'd be surprised. Okay. I have thoughts about this.
Hear it.
So first of all, narcissism itself is a spectrum, right? So when we talk about narcissism and we say that it is statistically impossible for all of these people to be narcissists, what we're really talking about is narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
And it is statistically impossible for all of these people that we're claiming are narcissists to have narcissistic personality disorder. That being said, it's a huge spectrum, and it goes from completely healthy ego, right? Or like a little bit overinflated, like completely healthy, you wouldn't be a narcissist, but there's an overinflated ego and sense of self and self-importance, which can to like, I mean, I always talk about my mom being a narcissist and how, you know, my mom is someone who she's a narcissist because her emotional growth was stunted at the age of about 7. And it's actually perfectly appropriate for a 7-year-old to be narcissistic in this sense, because, you know, we wouldn't call a 7-year-old a narcissist, but their brain development, their prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for empathy and those sorts of that sort of functioning and thinking about others, hasn't developed yet. So children are by nature self-centered. This is why when we get divorced, it's really important to really reinforce for our kids that it's not their fault, because they think it's their fault, not because they're dumb, but because that is their brain development. That is their natural developmental state. So my mom is somebody who is an example of this, where she's not malignant. She absolutely cannot physiologically, neurobiologically can't think beyond herself. And so you know, my struggles with her over my lifetime have been working to separate myself out from someone who doesn't believe that there is any separation between us. And I mean that like in a very sort of clinical sense. Like there's no place where you know, I say I'm cold and she says it's not cold.
Yeah.
And she's legitimately confused, you know? And so there's that level of narcissism. And then we've got the more sort of malignant kinds, where, you know, their acts hurt other people. Like they're so self-centered that their actions hurt other people. And it doesn't matter how much they're told and how much they're told by therapists or partners or whatever that their actions hurt someone. They can't think beyond their own ego. And so they'll continue to do it. And then further along the spectrum, we have narcissistic personality disorder and sociopathy, where like they're really dangerous people.
Yeah. No remorse, no empathy.
Right.
And then they learn how to mimic feelings.
Right. Exactly. And so I would say I would go out on a limb, totally a non-clinical limb, because I am, you know, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a diagnostician, but given the spectrum of narcissism as it can occur in humans, I would go out on a limb and say, actually, yes. I think men raised in patriarchy are by definition narcissists.
Yeah, maybe. If it walks like a duck, I guess.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. And so then, it begs the question, right? Like, is he a narcissist or is he just an asshole? And does it matter?
Does it matter? Mm-hmm.
Does it matter? And so I talk about this a lot in my programs and on my podcast. Like, it really doesn't. It matters if it gives you a clear lens.
Yeah.
It matters if it has you go, oh, that's what that is. And then you can Google narcissism and be like,
right.
Oh.
And if he's willing to go get like clinical support for it.
Well, yes and no, but even he might, but I don't know. They tend not to by definition.
Some do. I don't think many.
Yeah. Right. But mostly it's useful for someone to go, oh, that's what that is. And then be able to Google it and have a better understanding of it and go, oh, great. I get it. Mm-hmm. I get it. That's not something I want for my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Should someone stay in a relationship or marriage if they have kids with that person and stay just for the kids?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be your answer.
Quickly. Nope.
Next question.
So, okay. Yeah. No, we're done. I can explain that a little bit. If it is a toxic environment, if it's a not toxic environment and you make that choice and you want to, if it's just you're unhappy, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But still, I would say this is your one wild and precious life. And why would you do something like that? Mm-hmm. But if it is at all toxic, then what you're doing is, when you say that you're staying for your children, is you're kind of, first of all, you're keeping them in toxicity. And a lot of people will say, but I want to stay because I can mitigate it. I can be there to sort of run interference. And what I say to that is that you're keeping your children in that environment 100% of the time. And by doing that, you're actually condoning it, you're defending it, and you're supporting it. And beyond that, you're guaranteeing that the generational cycles are going to repeat for another generation, because we repeat our relationship models in our future relationships. And if the model that your kids see in your house is super toxic, then they will go on to choose toxic relationships. This is the reason I left my marriage. It was the moment when I went, oh my God, I have to leave for my son. Mm-hmm. My son is going to grow up to be an emotional abuser, and he's going to choose codependent women to prey upon. And I knew it clearly, 100%. And so if you don't want the relationship that you have for your children, then staying for them does them no favors. Mm-hmm. Additionally, if it is toxic and you are able, now look, if we're talking about physical violence, then you need to call your local domestic violence shelter and get an exit plan and make sure your children are safe. But if it's emotional abuse and other forms of toxicity, if you provide them a safe place that is free of this toxicity, that it is nurturing, that it is a safe place for them to land, even if it is only 50% of the time, you give them the gift of perspective. And what I mean by that is that you give them the opportunity to feel one thing. And then even if when they're with their dad, they feel something different, they actually start to learn the difference between the two feelings, and they're able to choose. Mm-hmm. Right? So at 16, my son is now able to name the way that he feels around his dad. And he's able to say, I don't feel that way here. I feel safe and loved and cared for here. Mm-hmm. And it's a different experience. But if I had stayed, he would feel scared all the time.
I'm interrupting this conversation to bring you a few words from some of our sponsors. One of the things that we've been doing pretty much consistently over the entire pandemic, I think it's been that long, is ordering from Green Chef. I order 3 meals about every other week. Sometimes it's more often and it's every week. And I love everything about them. I was trying to narrow it down and I was like, I don't think it's just one thing. So they make cooking super easy. So you spend less time stressing and planning and racking your brain and looking through your Pinterest boards for meals and recipes and all that. So you have more time to enjoy delicious home-cooked meals. And they're pre-made and pre-measured sauces and dressings and spices and meat and everything, and you get more chef-curated flavor in less time. I have found that since I've been ordering it for so long and I understand how the recipe card works, I'm even faster than I was previously. And Green Chef offers 24 always changing recipes to choose from, which I feel like is the perfect amount. It's not too many recipes to choose from. It's not enough. That's every week, so you never get bored. And they have options for every lifestyle. Green Chef offers keto and paleo, vegan, vegetarian, Mediterranean, gluten-free, absolutely whatever it is that you want and what you need. I will probably never stop using them because it makes me feel fancy and it's easy. It's so absolutely easy. So if you go to greenchef.com/noise130 and use code noise130, you get $130 off plus free shipping. That is greenchef.com/noise130. Use code noise130 to get $130 off plus free shipping. If you really, really know me, you know I love a beautiful serving bowl and serving dish. My mom had this big serving dish since I was a kid, and it has a crack in it that's been repaired. And a few years ago, when I was at her house for Thanksgiving, I asked her if I could have it, and she gave it to me. I don't know. Dishes, especially serving dishes, create so much meaning, and I can't wait to hand down to my kids special dinnerware that we use now. Because your table is where you nourish yourself, your friendships, and your family, and that's why Year and Day believes it's worth it to set a table you love. Year and Day gives you everything you need and nothing you don't to set the perfect table. I love, love, love the simplicity and beauty of Year and Day's designs. This isn't your grandma's china. It's a beautifully curated assortment of high quality dishes, flatware, and glass designed to enhance your modern life at home. And if you're not sure what you want, you can answer a few questions about how you live, how you entertain, and Year and Day will customize a complete set for you in just a few clicks. And this is very important. Everything is dishwasher safe. I think they're gorgeous. Please go check them out and support the show. Year and Day is giving Make Some Noise listeners a special offer. Visit yearandday.com/noise and use code NOISE to get $25 off your first order of $150 or more and receive free shipping on orders of $150 or more. That is yearandday.com/noise and use code NOISE. All of their things are beautiful. Go check them out. I especially love all of their bowls. So again, yearandday.com/noise and use code NOISE. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. People don't always realize that physical symptoms like headaches, teeth grinding, digestive issues can be indicators of stress, not to mention doom scrolling. That is something that I do that I wish I did not do as much as I do. Sleeping too little, sleeping too much, undereating, overeating. For me, for sure, insomnia is one of my biggest indicators of stress. It can show up in all kinds of ways. And in a world that's telling us to do more, to hustle more, sleep less, it's celebrated if you sleep less and grind all the time. I am here to remind you to take care of yourself, do less, and hopefully try some therapy. Therapy has been incredibly helpful for me. I have long told you guys on this podcast that I am pretty much always seeing a therapist, especially in times of extra stress. So BetterHelp is customized online therapy. They offer video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy. Give it a try and see if online therapy can help lower your stress. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Make Some Noise listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/ Kickass. That's BETTERHELP.com/kickass. Do you help people who are in same-sex relationships or marriages?
I do and I don't, right? So, I mean, I think it's actually a very valid question. There are a lot of women in my Facebook group. A lot of women have gone through my programs who are in same-sex relationships. And look, these cultural dynamics that create these power dynamics show up in all kinds of relationships, right? So I see the same levels of toxicity in same-sex marriages because it's internalized. Yeah. It becomes internalized. So I have not yet actually worked privately one-on-one as a coach with a lesbian, which is what it would be. But they've gone through my programs and found them very helpful. Yeah. So yes and no.
I just wonder, I've had some friends who are in same-sex relationships that have divorced. And I just am curious if the level of toxicity is the same that it would be in heterosexual marriages that divorce.
I would say mostly not for these reasons. But then you have these, in the internalized stuff. And listen, women are just as capable of being toxic and narcissistic and abusive, right? Actually, that's not true. They're not just as capable. The split is about 80-20. So about 80% of emotional abusers are men.
Well, and then there's the conversation of reactive abuse, which is a whole nother conversation.
Then there's the conversation about reactive abuse. And look, we know this very well. I have in my family a super, super toxic, psychotic abuser who's a woman. So, they exist.
Okay. Let's talk about your divorce for a minute. And are you happier now than when you were married? I know the answer to that. But talk about that. Tell us.
Yes, I am so much happier. I think it's such a great, it's such a great question. I think it's important. And you are too, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
When I was married, I was like this Stepfordy, I was an empty shell. I was an empty shell of myself. God, I had no substance. I was so beaten down, and I had bent myself into so many pretzels to try to be enough for this man for whom there is no enough ever. And I was so empty, Andrea. I was so empty. And it took me a couple of years to start to feel like myself again. And when we're being abused, first of all, I think it's really important for women to hear that you actually can't do the healing work while being abused.
Right.
Right. You can't heal from trauma while you're still experiencing the trauma. You can't let's take a wound, right? Like a physical wound, right? Your arm can't heal if someone keeps breaking it. And that's really the same thing. And so I was just in a state of, I think I was in a trauma response. I was in a frozen trauma response for so long. People would say, "How are you?" And I'd be like, I don't know. I actually didn't know how I was and how I felt because I was frozen. And so getting out of that, first of all, and allowing myself to heal was one part of why I feel why I'm so much happier. And I live my life on my own terms. I am not trying to please somebody else. I'm not doing a codependent dance 24/7. And, look, even if your marriage is not toxic and abusive and all of those things, if you're unhappy, we deserve to be happy as humans. We deserve to make choices for ourselves that make us happy and that show our children what happiness is and looks like and what strength looks like. Look, I am not repartnered. I don't have another relationship, but my son, my Mother's Day card this year, my son, 16, wrote to me, "Thank you for showing me how to be a good and healthy man." Like, and it makes me cry. It makes me so sad that he doesn't get that from his dad. But it makes me really proud that I still get to raise a really good man in this world. And the only reason I could do it is by being out. And so that gives me fulfillment. My work gives me so much fulfillment. I live my life on my own terms. And there's just, my God, there's nothing better.
Yeah. Well, I want to circle back to something you said where you were saying, like, you know, you can't heal if you stay in the relationship with your manipulator, abuser. And I've thought about that before. Like, I think to myself, you know, especially like when I'm in deep therapy, talking about my former marriage, and I've thought, what would I have done if he would have come back and like truly like stripped everything down and said, I've got to go to like intense therapy and like deal with this shit. And I want to, you know, like, because I don't think it's super common, but it does happen. So one of my colleagues, it's a woman, and she was actually on the podcast. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. Her name's Andrea J. Lee. She started a Substack where she talks about her own abuse. Like, she was verbally abusing her husband for years and didn't even really know it because it was what she knew, because she was verbally abused by her mother. And so I forget exactly how she kind of like came to see the light. I don't know I can't remember if her husband like threatened to leave or what was going on, but she threw herself into therapy and like is a changed person, and her marriage is so much better for it. So it does happen. People change, people heal, people take responsibility for their terrible behavior. But I think it takes a lot of work on both and to build that trust back. That's the part I think I don't know if I ever could have come back from that.
That's right. That's right. And I see this a lot, actually. I do see men who, because I work with women, I'm just, you know, using that as an example, but I see men who have, quote, seen the light, and they start to do the work. And there are a lot of women who are like, he's genuinely changing, but I don't, my feelings aren't there anymore.
Yeah. They've been emotionally divorced for a lot longer.
That's right. And my answer to that is that's great. Like, you're okay. You're still allowed to go. You're allowed to go. And what you're doing is actually I had a client this morning actually to say that, you know, her husband did all the work and he is like genuinely changed, and she couldn't stay. There was too much water under the bridge. There was too much trauma. There was too much fear, and she couldn't do it. And now he's dating somebody else. And she's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Now someone else gets the good guy that I put in all of this energy. It's like I sacrificed myself on the, like, you know, on the pyre of whatever for this man's change. And now like someone else gets it, you know, and
there's grief in that, for sure.
There's so much grief in that. There's so much grief in that. And what I said was, number one, there's grief in that, and you have to allow and acknowledge the grief. And know that your kids now get the best version of their dad. And if this new relationship goes the distance, they get to be raised in that healthy environment that you created. You allowed for that to happen by leaving. And you may not get to reap the rewards of this changed man, but your kids do. And that right there is stopping the cycle.
Yeah.
Right there. And you know, it's still a hard pill to swallow. It still sucks.
For sure. And it probably comes back, you know, especially if they have to continue to communicate with their ex. And it's that whole, like, I wrote about this in Make Some Noise, like towards the end, like you are not his therapist, you know? And sometimes that ends up happening in relationships, and, you know, without even us knowing that it's happening. So
I see it all the time.
Yeah. I want to ask something really specific for people who might be thinking about walking into divorce or who are in it. A couple of questions. Like, let's talk about, you know, a marriage between a man and a woman. Should she be best friends with her ex?
No, maybe someday. So I've actually I've gone on about a 13-year journey with this question. Because as you know, Andrea, I started out best friends with my ex.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was like, oh my God, you guys had the most toxic, horrific marriage. How did you guys end up being such good friends? And like, we were like, oh, we couldn't make the marriage work. We were going to make the divorce work and like, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? The reason we were best friends was because in my now 13 years later, I can look back and say it was because I was burying my trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I was still in my trauma. This is when my drinking started escalating, by the way. I was burying the trauma. I was like, well, I'm out of the relationship. I don't have to deal with that anymore. So now we're just going to be friends and everything's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
Until it really actually wasn't. And for a while he continued to abuse me. It was less frequent, but it would have these like devastating spikes. I finally had to put some like seriously strong boundaries in place and do my own healing. And I think it's the same thing. Like if you go from like toxicity to best friends and you don't deal with the trauma and you don't give yourself space to just heal. I mean, look, if there wasn't toxicity and like, I know there's a Instagram account called Husband-in-Law, and they're Mormon and they were married, but her husband was gay.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
now she's remarried or something.
She's remarried and the three of them are best friends.
Yeah.
Totally fine. Right? Like it works.
Yeah.
Nobody's upset. Like totally get it. Like I think that's fine. For most people, I think that we should go through divorce and start off with a more of a parallel track and do your own work, do your own healing. And then look, if later on, as you have developed yourself as an individual, if you both come together and you can forge that friendship, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That's best for your kids. That is like best case scenario. But give yourself some time.
Yeah.
Give yourself some time to heal so that you're choosing your friendship not from the same place that you chose the marriage.
Yeah, it sounds like boundaries are the absolute top priority when it comes to the relationship that you have with your ex. Because I remember also you starting to this was years ago, like starting to get involved and be kind of the mediator between the problems with your ex and his wife that he's been remarried to for a while. And I was like, okay, because you know him so well and you're friends with his wife. And that's just, that's codependent behavior.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, this is stuff I'm still dealing with. And I hesitate to talk about it too much because it's not really my story to tell, but I struggle with the balance still because I do know him. And what she struggles with is so familiar. And I want her to know that she's not alone and that she's not crazy.
And maybe there's like an unconscious part of you that like wants to heal yourself through that marriage too.
Let me tell you, I have transference dreams about her all the time, where I'm like rushing to protect her and I'm taking care of her. And I'm like, oh my God, this is about me. I'm trying to protect my younger self that I could like, it's so Freudian. It's insane, right? Because she's 8 years younger. So it was me 8 years ago. It's the whole thing, right?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's right there. And so I'm conscious and I'm aware of it. And also I'm like, girl, I'm here. I don't step into it ever. I don't step into it. I'll say, how are you? And she will be like, okay. Or she'll unload on me. And if she unloads, like we unpack it and then I step away from it because I have experienced this is what I do for a living.
Yeah.
Right. But the reason I do it for a living is because of him. So it's complicated.
So complicated. Yeah. Those are like my favorite two words. Okay. I have one more question and it's going to be super specific for people who have children who are dealing with this. So how would someone deal with having to communicate with their ex about the kids during a possible high conflict or medium conflict divorce?
Yes, such a good question. There are great co-parenting apps on the market. And if it's high conflict,
there's an app for everything.
There's an app for everything. And if it is a high conflict situation, there are a couple of apps I recommend. There's one called FAYR, FAYR. And then there's another one called the Peaceful Parent app or Peaceful Co-Parent app. I can't remember. And
we'll find it and put that in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. And I also have a discount code for FAIR, so we can put that in as well.
Okay, perfect.
But the Peaceful Parenting app is amazing because you can set you can basically like tell them they can only answer yes or no. So you can set it to canned responses where they can only respond with like multiple
it's like a mediator.
Choice. Yes.
In an app.
And you can set it so that they can only message you like 3 times a day.
Does it flag abusive language?
It might. Well, there's another
like
one
that Bark app for like your kids.
Right. There's Our Family Wizard has a tone monitor. And that's different, but it's a much more clunky app, but they do have a tone monitor so that it'll flag it and be like, maybe there's another way for you to say this.
Yeah. That's so amazing.
But the more important thing, even if you don't use an app, one of the more important things is there's a great book out there called BIF for Co-Parent Communication. And it's written by a man named Bill Eddy. And Bill is the founder of the High Conflict Institute. So this man knows from high conflict. And the BIF method of communication, it's BIFF. And the BIF method of communication is brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And I highly recommend the Co-Parent book because like a third of the book is instructional and then 2/3 of the book are examples for like everything. It's so helpful because, you want to get into it. You want to like shame them back. You want to be like, why would you do that to me?
Stick it to him.
Right. You stick it to him. But the best way for peaceful communication with a high conflict person is to keep it brief, informative, right? Just give them the information, just the facts, please. Right. Friendly, right? Like, hi, I hope this email finds you well. The children have soccer at 5:30 today. I trust you will be there on time.
Period.
Thanks. Period. Yeah. Thanks. Not because you're always late and it has such an impact on the kids.
I have to remind you.
And I can't believe I have to remind you of this. And, it really impacts them when they're late because then they don't get the blah, 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 like, right. And it's friendly and firm, right? So you're not asking permission. And I think that this is something that women do overwhelmingly. And I talk about this in my program as well in terms of how to tell your husband you want a divorce, is that you're not asking permission. And this is something that we do all the time as women. I have people say to me all the time, like, well, I tried to tell him I wanted to get a divorce and he won't let me. And I'm like, this is a unilateral decision. This is a one-way communication. You are telling, you are not asking. So it's the same thing in all high conflict communication, right? You are telling, you're not asking, you're not looking for their agreement, their understanding, their approval, or anything. You're simply stating what is so. And then you're getting on with your life.
Oh, so helpful. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Before we close up, where can everyone find out more about you?
Thank you, my love. Everything's on my website, kateanthony.com. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at The Divorce Survival Guide, and my podcast, The Divorce Survival Guide podcast, is available in all the places.
Love it. And that will all be in the show notes, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, Kate.
Oh my God, I adore you. Thank you so much for having me, Andrea.
And thanks everyone for listening and staying with us this whole time. I know how valuable your time is, and I'm grateful that you spend it with me and my guests. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye, everyone. Hi there. Swinging back by to say one more thing. You know how I'm always giving advice over here on the show and on social media, and a couple of those things is that I'm always telling you to ask for what you want, be clear about it, and also ask for help. So I am taking a dose of my own medicine, and I'm going to do that right now. It would be the absolute best and mean the world to me if you reviewed and subscribed to this show, Make Some Noise podcast, on whatever podcast platform of your choice. And even more importantly, It would matter so much if you shared this show. Sharing the show is one of the few ways the podcast can grow, and that also gives more women an opportunity to make some noise in their lives. You can do that by taking a screenshot when you're listening on your phone and sharing it in your Instagram or Facebook stories. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me at @HeyAndreaOwen, and I try my best to always re-share those and give you a quick thank you DM. And also you can tell your friends and family about it. Tell them what you learned. Tell them a really awesome guest that you found on the show that you started following. Whatever it is, I appreciate so much you sharing about this show.